Welcome to Flesh and Pod, a flesh and blood podcast, breaking down weekly news and notes from the tournament scene, community drama, game strategy, and more. And now, here are your hosts, Darick and Logan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 149 of Flesh and Pod. My name is Logan. I am your host. Please like and subscribe if you're still listening at the 11-second mark. To us on YouTube. We're like 80 subscribers away from the magical 500 number, which I'm terrible at everything. And so I have never cared about that number, but now I kind of care. So just do the thing. I guess it's free. I don't know. Yeah. And with me as always is, I guess he's just Darick today. Just Darick.
Yeah.
Just Darick Oswald. Darick.
Sometimes you have to take off the superhero cape and just be the normal version of you.
There is no normal version of you.
Sure there is.
Really?
Just because you've never seen it doesn't mean it's not there.
I, at the very least, choose not to believe. Because what is normal when it comes to Darick Oswald? Is it Googling the strength of ceiling fans? Is it sitting
First of all, I want to be very clear about something. I have never once Googled the structural stability of ceiling fans because I'm a man of science and I'm going to test it myself.
Okay. Well, I'm going to need you to gain a bunch of weight before you do that.
Well, my time in Italy might just do that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's actually a possibility. Yeah, did you do it? I know the answer to this question, which is why it's even funnier to ask you. Did you do anything in Flesh and Blood, Darick?
I did, yeah. I played.
Oh, really?
I played some more testing games on my Arachne list that I was going to play because I really like where my Aurora list is at, but I don't own all the stuff to play Aurora. I have not opened hardly enough Rosetta to build it, and I have not yet went on a purchasing spree for singles, mostly because I don't know. I wanted to finalize it, and I don't know if I'm going to make any last minute changes, but my goal is if I'm going to buy singles, I will probably put in my order so that my cards should be arriving when I get back from vacation. That's the other thing. I just don't want a bunch of stuff left in my mailbox. So with that in mind, I was like, all right, well, I've been having fun with the Arachne list. I'm thinking about playing it. Then I went to an event for Altered, the trading card game. It was like a learn to play for introducing the game to new players and so on and so forth on a Saturday night. A friend of the show and in our Discord and local to me, Ben, was there. Had a good time. Stark played Altered, taught some people how to play. I'm very proud of him for actually teaching people. But I was talking to Ben about the pros and cons of things that I did want to see, didn't want to see. Do I want to get up and make the drive, whatever? And then he talked me into it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go home and sleeve up Arachne. And I did. To my credit, I did. I went home and I sleeved up Arachne. Got everything ready to go. And then I fell asleep without setting an alarm. Not normally a problem, except I've had my back has been hurting me, and we're doing a bunch of stuff to prep for our family trip to Italy here. Work has been crazy. So my wife very kindly was just letting me sleep in. And then I woke up at around 10 and she's like, hey, are you going to that event? Because I even said to her the day before, I was like, hey, I want to go to this event tomorrow. And she was like, okay. She was like, are you going to your event? And I looked at the clock and I was like, nope, because it was just a little after 10 a.m. And that is not enough time for me to, even if I just left in my underwear at that moment, I could not drive there and get there in time. It's about an hour and 20 minutes for me normally. The route to where the place is actually just littered with construction right now. Because this event was in Ann Arbor. So if you're from Michigan or you know about the University of Michigan, big college town. There's a lot of traffic in and out to begin with. And right now there's horrible construction there. So basically I wasn't going to make it on time, even, not counting like a showering or even if I didn't shower and just tried to put on clothes or whatever. So I sadly did not make it. And then the worst thing is Ben, of course, sent me a message saying, oh, by the way, none of those enigmas that you were worried about showed up. So it would have been a good time.
Yep.
But it's okay. It was only the first weekend. I do leave on Sunday for my family trip to Italy, so I'm hoping to see if I can get to one on Saturday. I do, however, say hoping because it will likely depend on how prepared I already am for the trip, because we have to get up very early on Sunday and make the drive. So if I can get everything squared away Friday night, then I'm going to try to go to one on Saturday.
That makes sense.
If there's any drafts, if anyone knows, if you're listening from Italy, if there's any drafts happening in Italy, because I don't want to take cards with me, but if there are drafts happening somewhere in Italy, the weekend of the 18th, 19th, 20th or whatever, maybe I'll swing by a local game store and try to win a ProQuest draft in Italy.
Yeah, sure.
Why not?
And why not? Mainly because you're in Italy and you could be doing other shit, but to each their own. That's fine. Yeah, the only thing I did in Flesh and Blood this week is I just decided I had an extra couple of cases of Everfest sitting around that I paid like $130 for the case. And so I just decided, with seeing what Swarming Gloomveils are at price wise, that was a fun Google. I just decided, let's bust a case. And so I did. And the case paid for itself in like 6 cards. Like, why the fuck are people just selling Everfest cases at dirt? It doesn't make sense.
Because no, it actually does make sense. And we have talked about this phenomenon on this show. Price memory.
I get it.
How long have people said Everfest was a joke of a set?
Oh,
right?
forever.
We've heard it for forever. How many times on this show have we went through the cards that are actually in Everfest and been like, actually, this set was full of bangers?
Swarming Gloomveils are $23.
No, there's one at, one of 2. There are 2 at 23, and after that...
26, and then 30.
Yeah. The core group of them are all at 30. There's a couple of people trying to slide under real quick, but...
And then Shimmers of Silver are $11. Sure. Great. Miraging Metamorph, which I didn't think was worth anything, is $17. Okay. Here they are. Whee!
It was a non-draftable set, so there wasn't like a bunch of it that was opened from events. It was a set that was very much maligned when it first came out. Everyone said it was a joke. And it was a set that kind of crept up in power level, because that was, again, it was right after Tales of Aria. Everything seemed really powerful. So when stuff came out in Everfest, if it was on par with Tales, it was just the norm at the time. So you kind of forget. And then all that stuff went away, but it turns out all the Everfest stuff was also still really good. And so I just truly personally believe that people don't want to open it because it's not a draftable set, and it wasn't opened a lot back then. And then the price memory thing kicked in. So yeah.
But yeah, I opened like 3 Shimmers, 2 Metamorphs, 2 Swarmings. And I'm like, well, that paid for the case. So all this other just stack of like $5, $6, $7 cards is just gravy on top, I guess.
Yep.
So if anybody needs stuff from Everfest, just hit me up. I got plenty, more than willing to sell it too, because it's extra. But all right. But that's all I did. I didn't play anything. Was a busy week for me with Thursday. I was up to something. Actually don't remember what now. And that's our normal armory nights, our Thursdays and Saturdays. And then Saturday I was at the Iowa State football game where they beat the ever-loving shit out of Baylor. So that was a fun game to attend. Iowa State Tailgate is still super underrated. It's an ick at this point because the people that know, they know. And it's a great vibe. And then Jack Trice Stadium is just a cool stadium. It's that classic no bad seats in the house. It's only like a 60,000 fan stadium instead of like the monolithic 100Ks in Ann Arbor and Columbus. So it's an easy stadium to get in and out of. And like I said, the vibe is always great in there. The student section's fucking nuts. And so you had to watch them do all their crazy shit. And yeah, and it turns out the team is good, which is always helpful too. Yeah. So the Cyclones are now 5-0, heading to Morgantown this weekend to go play West Virginia. I was going to go to Morgantown and for a friend of ours, Anna, the Rune Babe's birthday, and to go watch the Iowa State game. However, my friend that lives in Mexico that I went to the wedding for in March, he's like, hey, we're making our annual trip to Iowa on this weekend. I'm like, of course you are. Of course, it is the weekend of the 11th, 12th, and 13th when I'm going to West Virginia. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess we could see you the next time, whenever we get around next. And I'm like, you live in another country. Like, come the fuck on. And so I regretfully am not going to make it to Morgantown. I did try to find a way to do it. Turns out there isn't a lot of flights from Des Moines to Morgantown, West Virginia, in case you're wondering. And if you've ever wondered, there just aren't.
I mean, I had not wondered, but that tracks.
Yeah, because it's a night game, and I was like, man, if I could land in Morgantown at even 10 a.m. on Saturday, that would be pretty great, and I would still be able to do all the things and then fly back on Monday with, because it's a holiday weekend. That would have worked out great, and that's not even remotely close to a thing I can do. So, okay. To the point that the drive to Morgantown, West Virginia, I think is 14 hours. And the drive time and total flight time to get there with layovers, everything else is about the same. So not conducive to working. So instead, I will be here, and then I'm going to attend a vampire party on Saturday. And then maybe I'll go play a very hungover ProQuest on Sunday, since I have that Monday off due to Indigenous Peoples Day. So maybe that. But this week was a nothing. Next week will be a maybe, and then the week after will be a double dip. And then the weekend after that, I think I'm going to try to hit up 2 if possible. Because I'd like to get as many bites at the apple due to the location of the Pro Tour this time around, which we'll get into a little bit later. But first, let's talk about something that happened that may actually cause the demise of this show. So, for a very long time, we have been ardent supporters of Mara Faris and her ascendancy to the throne and eventual fall from the throne of Volcor. We've given her a platform on this show. We've always felt like she was one of us because she couldn't close a tournament. And neither can we. Well, at the Battle Hardened in Washington, D.C. this past weekend, Mara Faris closed a tournament. Yep. She won Battle Hardened Washington, D.C. Admittedly, it was in limited, so she still can't, take a hero, grind it, and make it work. But she was able to close a tournament. So it's hard to reconcile that with the Mara we know and love. Because once you're a winner, it just doesn't feel the same. I feel like we'd be looked down on. And I don't know if we can handle that.
I just feel like this is her heel turn. I'm gonna have to start cutting promos.
Yeah, I feel like she kind of has already turned heel though.
And I think she was flirting with it. I think this is the big reveal heel turn.
Well, she's on like her third faction, right?
Yeah.
Because she's obviously a faction hopper.
She's a faction hopper, but also it's not even just like heel turn stuff. She's on a different persona even, right? Like she started as the Christmas creature, if you will, and now she's onto what was her Kane run with the mask. And I feel like this is the unmasked Kane. The mask is off. We know she's really a winner.
Yeah, but she's not like the bigoted mayor of a southern town.
Yet. She did win in DC. Maybe this is the politics to come.
I guess. Maybe. But in all honesty, congratulations, Mara, on winning. We are proud of you, even though it hurts us. And we knew it was just a matter of time before you actually won one of these things. Just so happened that it was this week, and I was really hoping to get past 200 episodes before you actually closed, and you beat it by over a year. So,
but now,
not quite a year.
Now she can just go to Worlds, and I'll have somebody to hang out with.
Yeah, you have that problem right now of not a ton of people going to Worlds, and like I said, I gave you a list of who I knew would be there, but that list isn't long. It turns out traveling to Osaka is definitely not cheap, as I learned firsthand. Yeah. You're using credit card airline points to do it, and I burned all of my points earlier this year on other trips.
Yeah, I am not rolling in the dough, as they say. This was definitely we're cashing in all of my credit card points thing, because I didn't want to miss it. But I'm also going solo, so that also means I can travel cheap. I just didn't know who all was going, and every time I talked to somebody, they're like, well, I'm not going. And I mean, you gave me a list now, so that's better than what I had before, because before it was literally like people I know who work for LSS and then Azure. And don't get me wrong,
Elaine.
I didn't know Elaine was going. So
yeah, Elaine and Bryn will be there.
Okay, so that's more people then, because before I was literally like everyone I know that was going is working it, and like I love that for them, but also they will have their time eaten up. It's very hard to hang out with, some of the LSS folks or whatever, just because, and rightfully so, they're just so tired at the end of the event, right? Many of them don't want to go hang out, or when they do, it's like an LSS dinner or something that I'm really not invited to, right? So it's one of those like, oh, and then poor Azure, man, he's spending all day long doing sketches and whatever. Like he's usually tired by the end of it. So
it's true, but I think that I am going to go to Portland, though.
I really want to.
November. It turns out like it's not expensive. The flight is pretty cheap. The hotel's real cheap.
Yeah. So here's the interesting bit. So the problem that you have with Japan, I actually have with Portland. I am not allowed.
Take your wife. Yeah.
I am not allowed to go to Portland without my wife, because it's like one of her favorite places on the planet. So,
but the difference between taking Sophia with you to Portland and me taking Holly with me to Osaka is several $1,000s.
True. However, my coffers are quite depleted because I am taking Sophie and the kids to Italy and then like 9 days later going to Japan. So it does not take much to tax my purse strings at the moment.
Yeah,
and Portland
how many kidneys does Stark actually need?
Well, yeah. Here's the thing. He has my genetics. You're not getting a good kidney out of him anyway. All right. Like you can't sell his,
know that.
You can't sell his body for parts anymore, and you can sell mine. So that's a problem. But that is also, so like, that's the other part. It's not even just like, it's, you take me, you take Sophie, but then it's also like, we have to have somebody watch the kids, and there's a whole, like, don't get me wrong, I would love to go. I love Portland. Like I said, it's her favorite place on the planet. But right now it's not looking super great. Now, if I inexplicably like win a bunch of money in Osaka or something, then maybe I'll turn around and go, but I don't see that happening either.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I was out. I mean, I was out playing Top Golf tonight with a buddy of mine owns a marketing firm, which is another thing that I have never thought about crossing streams with, considering, we are in a production space where we put out videos all the time. And I have one of my oldest friends in the world who owns a marketing company that has over $100,000 in video and production equipment sitting in his studio that is less than 5 minutes from my house. And I've literally never used it. He's just like, you can use it whenever you want to. And I'm like,
yeah,
probably should have thought about that a few times.
You and I don't do anything marketing. So
no, we don't. And we should at some point, but we don't. But like, even he was just like, if you want to come in and just like do a if Darick's ever in town, which you've never been here, it's just like, you just come in and do like a high production thing if you want to. So if we ever get another spoiler card, which is, coin flip at best.
Episode 300.
That's a very long time from now. Then if it does happen, though, if we get to spoil something and we want to make something incredible and high production value, then you can come here and we can do it in the studio with real equipment.
All right, hear me out. We start by saying, we said if we ever got another spoiler card, we would do something incredible, right? Like that's the lead in. Then it fades in from black to me wearing the Mrs. Incredible outfit where I've got like the big hips, I serve cunt, as the kids say, and we just play it up from there.
I mean, okay. You know what? I'm sold. Let's do that. Okay, great. That's the plan. I don't have anything else for that. Like, what am I going to say? Am I going to say, I think that that's a bad idea? I can't do that because I don't agree with that. I think it's a fantastic idea. And seeing you with a cinched waist and bulging hips with a glaring moose knuckle is, I didn't know how high that was on my list of things to do, but it's way up there now. So we've seen your nipples. Now we just need the rest of the picture.
Exactly. And then we'll have you off camera screaming something about, where is my super suit?
Why do you need it? Don't sue us. There was also a ProQuest Plus trademark LSS 2023 at Washington. I could not find results, mainly because there was also whatever the thing they call what used to be GPs, but you have to qualify for them now in Magic, was going on in DC as well. And
what are they, like modern qualified?
It's RC, I think. Regional championship?
Maybe.
Regional championship, I think. But like they had like 1,200 players. And so my thought was, why you have to qualify for an event that has 1,200 players in it?
Mm-hmm.
But why? Why not just make it open entry at that point?
Because it's Hasbro.
I guess. At any rate,
as much as I want to dunk on them, I broke down. I bought the new D&D Player's Handbook. I miss playing tabletop RPGs.
I bought it at Gen Con.
So I'm gonna take it with me and read it on the plane to Italy. So I've got something to do for the flight and get caught up on things. And
it's basically Baldur's Gate 3. It's really well put together, and we've been working with it to start a campaign up here shortly. And so I was getting my character completely done, and it was the easiest character creation I've ever done in my life. It was so, like, using the D&D app was so easy. And I hate giving Hasbro money. I really do. But they also own Transformers, and I love Transformers. So there's that. and they're the ones that do all the Marvel Legends stuff, and some of that stuff's really cool. So it's really hard not to give Hasbro money, but I digress. The best part of the new D&D handbook, though, I think, is how they took away a lot of the homogenization and made like the classes and species matter a bit more again.
Yeah, I obviously haven't read through it, but I had heard some things just from folks I know who do play that really got me excited. Specifically when it came to some of the martial builds, because somebody was telling me that like it's not every build is a power attack build anymore. And that they, you know, I've been told that they didn't do the best that they could have done, but that they've done a good job with giving you starting feats through origins and whatever. And
backgrounds.
Yeah, it just kind of sounded like they were addressing a lot of the qualms I had with like the last iteration. Because basically the last one, God, it's been like what, 10 years now, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah.
I didn't hop on that train for two reasons. But one was I didn't see that it was that much of a departure from the stuff that I already owned. And so then that leads into part two, which is I have a massive, to my left here anyway, collection of 3.5 stuff. So
sure.
It's like one of those, like I could rebuy all of this again, or I could just keep playing 3.5 because there wasn't like a huge difference. But everything that I've heard about the newest one kind of got me excited. So
it's a pretty big departure from what I've known in the past, and most of it seems like it's for the better towards player experience, and I would also imagine DM experience, honestly. So yeah, it's good. Like I said, I picked it up at Gen Con because it was early access, and then on top of that, there was a thing in the early access, like in the book, that gave you the digital version for $10 instead of 30. So that was also well worth it to do. And so basically it was like at the price they were selling it at, it was like buying both the digital and physical versions for the same price. Like
right.
You could just buy the regular one now. But like I said, I was very happy with it. I am very happy with it. And I can't wait to actually get in and start playing. I didn't know how slick they had made the D&D Beyond app, but holy shit, is that thing well put together. Considering it's a Hasbro product and like the Magic Companion app is too, they could not be further apart as far as usability goes. It's really nice. And I didn't expect that. I thought it would just be another dog shit taco from Hasbro, and it was not. So props to them on that too. But we're a Flesh and Blood podcast, I think, still, allegedly.
We're about to be a Duolingo podcast. I just looked down at my phone because it was like blinking at me, and the Duolingo bird is really pissed off at me right now.
Yeah, that asshole gets pushy real fast.
Yeah.
So we do have results from ProQuest London, which we'll get into here soon, week 1. With a lot of people were surprised by this. I was not. But Aurora actually had the most wins on the week with 23. So nice there. I think it's actually 24 because I think that's the deck that won the ProQuest Plus in DC, but I can't confirm it. However, she has 120 points and 23 ProQuest London wins, so it tracks that she would have won the ProQuest in DC as well. So 23 wins in the PQ London events. Enigma was second with 22. And then the drop off is precipitous because it goes from 22 with Enigma to Azalea with 10.
Yeah.
So big drop. And then New, Viscerai, and Florian were the only other ones with 5+. So good bit of diversity once we get past Aurora and Enigma. And I think a lot of people already kind of had them pegged as the two early run decks.
Yeah, I had them as definitely going to be the most popular ones. I didn't expect the two of them to be so like head and shoulders above the rest in terms of wins. I will say I'm also kind of surprised Azalea was third. I expected, if I'm being honest, Florian to be third because I actually think he's in a pretty good spot. I especially liked what I saw out of some of the Japanese builds as I was looking through some of those deck lists. So I'm a little surprised that he's there, but it also just might be a thing where Aurora is speaking to Runeblade players of the past a bit more.
I think it's some of that. I also think that the Japanese build for Florian wasn't quite out there yet as much as it could have been, because the standard builds from even Battle Hardened Milwaukee of Florian really just folded just folded so easily to Aurora. Like, they did not have much game into it. And so it just turned into here's, a quarter of the field that you just can't beat.
Right.
And that's never a good thing. But I think the other builds of Florian we're starting to see that have a little bit more silver bullet feel and a little more flexibility in the lists. It's not plan A and you better hope plan A works. I think that those I think his win share pops up in week 2. But right now, not so much. We do have the role of Dishonor here, which is the heroes without any victories yet this season. They are Katsu, not that surprising. Dash.io, that one feels surprising.
Well, I think, first of all, let me just say this is very short-lived. Ben and I were talking about this quite a bit, and when the Armory deck comes out, it is sounding like she might end up being one of the top contenders.
I think she's the best aggro deck as soon as that deck is out.
Yeah, there's a lot of shenanigans that deck is going to be capable of.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And people have the list now, and so the brewery is already going in earnest when it comes to that hero. Kasai with no wins, not surprising. Kasai into Enigma is a nightmare. Kasai into other CYB decks isn't easy. There's just a lot of it's a difficult time to be a warrior. Betsy hasn't won shit anyway ever. Yeah. Olympia, same story. Victor, this one surprised me. I thought Victor would have at least some game, because Victor into Aurora is quite good for them on the Victor side.
Yeah, but in my opinion anyway, I think you're really bad into any of the Enigmas.
You're very bad into that, yeah.
I just, as somebody who played a lot of Guardian back when like Prism was popular, the problem is, even if there's not a lot that show up in the top 8s, you don't need there to be a lot converting. You just need them to be in the field. So when it's a popular deck and you're playing Guardian and it hard counters you like that, you're gonna have a rough time, right? Like, you might have a situation where you look at the top 8 and there might be like 1 or 2 Enigmas and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. But then you go and you look at the numbers, and if it was, even 15% of the field, like, that might not seem like a lot of the field, but that means that you have to go through, let's just say 5 or 6 rounds and not hit it, because yeah, you can hit 1, but then you have to win all of your other matchups essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to hope you don't hit it early. That's the other thing, because tiebreakers care about your round loss. If you lose matchup roulette round 1, you're just playing from behind the rest of the day. So I think Victor will eventually get some wins, but I'm not surprised that there was none right now. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Bravo, Reinar, Max are our next trifecta of, that doesn't surprise me. Riptide was surprising to me that no Riptide wins. So I think some of that is if they can't keep up with the speed of an Aurora, but they also just have a hard time with an Enigma in a lot of cases, I think.
I think that it is a familiarity thing. Other than the people who are like really dedicated to Riptide, I think your average player just saying like, hey, I think I might want to play Ranger right now, they're going to pick Azalea, right? Because there's just more resources available for, learning how to play the deck, how to pilot it. You can look at a lot more lists, right? A lot of times if you are picking something up for the first time, you'll look at other lists that have been successful and try to reverse engineer it. And you just don't really have a lot of that with Riptide right now. So I think that Riptide has the tool set. I just don't think that the representation is high enough for him to convert, right? Because there might be, like, let's be honest, there's probably going to be like 1 to 2 riptides per event to begin with. And then you have to hope one of them converts and then also wins.
Yeah. Then we have Teklo, Arachne. No wins for Arachne.
Yet.
Yet. They'll get there.
They'll get there.
Yet. And Ocilio, which is the hardest nut to crack, I think, in Rosetta by far. So that's the dishonor list for this week. Obviously, some of these will come off of it next week. At least I think they will. But yeah, a couple of surprises in there, but most of it is stuff that we're like, yeah, that makes sense. Anything to add there?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. Moving on. We had a discussion last week about our Living Legend issues with Verdance plus Kraken's Aether Vein, and we had a pretty good discussion on that. We got done recording. I edited the video. I got everything posted on the interwebs, and then I got a notification that there was an article, a banned and restricted announcement on Twitter that Kraken's Aether Vein is banned. So yet again, we do our best to wait out information when we can, and we still get fucked no matter what. So it doesn't actually matter. But so yes, Kraken's Aether Vein is banned in Living Legend. It is officially the first non-token card that is unplayable in any competitive format of Flesh and Blood. Congratulations, Kraken's Aether Vein. You did it. They had a very interesting dev talk that came out with Brian Gottlieb and James White. They did talk about Aether Vein quite a bit and how that they knew this is bad with AMP. Like this is gonna get wild.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted some data to see what it was like before doing anything about it. And they got their answer real quick and decided to act with a amount of expediency that the situation required, because there are, before the next announcement, ban and restricted announcement, there was also a Living Legend Battle Hardened in Ohio, and you can't have this thing going. It was bad enough for the MinMax crew, and they apologized to MinMax specifically in the article they wrote, having them run a ProQuest Plus at Living Legend when the format was miserable. And so yeah, they went ahead and just pulled the string on that, get it out. They also said some other interesting things. One of them was when they got to talking about the book bannings, the book burning of 2024. And they got into the things that they didn't touch a little bit, and High Octane came up. And it really sounds like they are very nervous about High Octane as soon as the -IO Armory deck becomes legal.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what Ben and I were talking about. And when he was telling me about what the list does, I basically was like, oh, so High Octane is a book, right? Like I thought we banned drawing 1 billion cards, and
we did, but
yeah, it is not looking good in the short term. And the worst part is, well, I don't know if it's the worst part. It's probably good for the game, but even if High Octane goes, I think that -IO is still going to be a really strong contender. But if they let it go even for a week, I think you're going to see a lot of people do some really scary things with what that deck is looking like it might be able to do.
Yeah, it's the problems are Cerebellum Processor, and the fact that that's going to stick around for basically every turn, it feels like. As it comes into play, you crank it, it enters with the 2 steam counters. It's a cost 0, it's a blue. At the start of your turn, destroy this unless you remove a steam counter, and then it's just once per turn, draw a card for no resources. So great. We're off to the races with this one card. And we have an issue here. We have an issue with the equipment, which is the high octane abuser when it comes to generating resources and action points at the same time. And it's so a lot of gunshots are coming at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, it is vastly possible. I didn't get a check in right now. I failed at doing that. Let me just pop it up really quick. There is definitely a possibility that Dash is at 920 on the Living Legend points. It would need 16 wins this week to just go away and take the pistol with it. So then you don't have to worry about the pistol combo, Teklo plasma pistol getting you. But Symbiosis shot is still going to be able to crank and gun down and things like that as you normally would. So it's not a big... It's a loss, but the deck is still really good.
Right.
So I don't know. I am concerned with how good some of this stuff is, because the power plant is just pay a resource, destroy this whenever you boost this turn, gain a resource, go again. So with high octane, you boost a bunch and you gain resources and action points, and you don't have to stop. You just get to keep going.
Well, and Ben was telling me that, there's combos running right now where you're, bouncing some of the items back and then replaying them as well, because you'll have the extra action points. So they do just stick around for a long time. And so while it's not like the chain of events where you like Art of War into an Art of War, or you like triple Blood Rush or whatever, you do still have these scenarios where you might end up with like a 6-card hand 3 turns in a row, which is absurd.
Right. And it's problematic, potentially problematic, I should say. We do see it a little bit already in on Talishar, where people are doing the abusive things with Dash.io. And I know a lot of people are, especially the mechanologist fans out there, are really up in arms about the consideration of losing high octane. But I think the realization has to hit that high octane, listening to them talk, high octane is preventing them from printing other things that may just be cooler, but they just can't, because high octane would ruin it.
Right.
And that if their card is problematic enough that you're consistently having to design around it, it probably doesn't belong. And I think that was sort of the message. But we'll see. It could be much ado about nothing. I mean, the deck doesn't block for shit. So there's a possibility that at a lower health pool, there are decks that can erase it. But against decks that aren't trying to erase it and deal piles of damage at once, they have to deal with the piles of damage that on a turn after turn basis that Dash.io is going to be presenting.
Right.
And there are definitely turns of 40 plus that Dash.io is going to present. And that's part of what they wanted to not happen. Also in the dev talk they discussed upcoming changes to Blitz and Living Legend and Blitz and how skirmishes work. So instead of having each event be worth a number of points, each season will be worth a pile of points. And then the pile gets divided up among the number of events that are run of that type. So like, let's say you have the option of running Blitz, Living Legend, or Sealed. Stores have the option. And there are 1,000 available points. I'll be higher than that. But like, let's say there's 1,000 available points, and only 100 stores decide to run Blitz, which is the only format that has points available, then each event would be worth 10 points. Again, just an example, not real numbers, but that's kind of how it sounded like it would work. And I think that that's an elegant solution to a degree, so that people can enjoy playing a Blitz hero for more than just a season when it comes to things like Zen, where they just could not ban a card fast enough to keep Zen from LLing in Blitz, which is insane.
That is kind of wild.
It is 2 weeks, speed ran the board, and they're like, but we're going to ban something. Yeah, it doesn't fucking matter. Anything to add?
No, I mean, overall, I think that doing something like that will also kind of help with the fears that I've been seeing pop up from time to time from new players. I think it's no secret that right now Flesh and Blood is seeing an influx of new players, in part because LSS has done a great job on the convention circuit. So again, shout out to them. I'm so happy they're doing that. We've got new people trying the game, playing the game. We like to make jokes about Reddit, but I've been very encouraged by the number of posts on Reddit I have seen where it's literally just like, hey, I'm just getting into the game looking for advice, or what hero should I pick, or all the things that we're accustomed to seeing when somebody new picks up the game, but there's just been a lot of them. And so I do think that one of the things that has some players nervous is investing in a hero and then having it hit Living Legend right away, right? So dividing up the points, making things, potentially last more than a season, whatever, I think will just kind of send the right message, especially in Blitz, because again, if you're a newer player, you're more likely to start in Blitz. And if you dive into the game and you bought into Zen and then he was gone 2 weeks later or whatever, that's a really big feels bad. So I just, I think it's good overall with that context, right?
Yep. Moving on, as we talked about earlier, the next Pro Tour is in London. That is the location of Pro Tour Europe. I know we were both hoping for Greece. We didn't get it.
Yeah, that's
London's
okay.
a pretty good consolation prize, I think. London is kind of an interesting place to spend some time, especially in the spring. And so we'd be April 10th through the 13th. And yeah, it's still the same formats, and according to the page, there'll be CC and Booster Draft for the Pro Tour. There'll obviously be a calling. There almost always is with Pro Tours. So how do you feel about London?
I mean, I've always wanted to go, and for me in particular, it's a really good European venue because there's a lot of cheap flights from Detroit to London direct. Depending on how many credit card points I could rack up by then, there's also some really good redemptions that I can do through Virgin, and they're based out of London right there. So it could potentially be viable for me, but I really want to qualify. And the problem is with all of this travel that I'm doing, I don't know if I'm going to get enough shots at it. So I've been trying to temper my expectations on that front, but that's just meaning that I'm going to have to make the decision on whether I just want to go for like the calling or something. And I don't know yet. Right now, things are just extra stressful because I have 2 pretty big trips immediately in front of me. And so it's very hard for me to like think about something in April of next year, but it's a good venue or a good location. I'm happy that they're getting a big event like that. Obviously, a lot of players in not just like London, but the United Kingdom in general, right? Like I know that there's the one store in Scotland there that usually comes over to our American events and has a good strong following and so on and so forth. So it's good for the game.
Yeah, I like it being in London. We just got to be really careful on those UK pummels. But outside of that,
Pummelgate.
Yeah, Pummelgate Part 2 would be great. What can we get this time? Like, can we get a what's a card that we could see some sharking on? There's got to be a good one. Gone in a Flash. they could, oh, sorry, I meant to play an instant here, or I played an instant here, and it was supposed to bounce that back to my hand. Yeah, you never said you're going to, and I wrote down my damage already.
No, it's hard to predict what the meta will be then anyway, but I think it's more likely to be one of the assassin cards, right? Like any of the ones where you have to have a certain number of activations to turn something on. So like Bonds of Agony, Double Trouble, or whatever. I can see it now. Somebody will be playing like Double Trouble and they'll go to activate Vambrace, and they will not declare that they're, activating their second attack reaction on that activation. And so the other player, won't do something, because that was the big thing with Pummelgate, right? It's like it went through. It's just one person never said like, hey, you have to discard a card. So the dude just never discarded the card, knowing, well, I don't know whether they knew or not. I don't want to assume intention, but like it's on both players to recognize triggers, right? So it was still their responsibility to just be like, hey, I'm supposed to discard. But yeah, I could see it happening with some of those conditional assassin cards.
Yeah. Okay, I could see that. All right, let's set up these listener questions. We got a few here to bust through. First one's from Polish Guy, good friend Rich. Angry Internet Guy asks, with LSS listening to the player base often, how much money do they need to make to make sure that stops so I can hate and doom scroll for weeks longer? What's the Hasbro number? Whatever that number is. That'll do it.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a case of money, personally. I gotta be honest. I don't know if it's New Zealand culture or just because, like James and Brian and some of those people, Josh, if it's just because they're good laid back folks. I don't think that it's a money issue. I think that in particular, they like subverting expectations, but like in a good way, right? So what we have to do is to just stop giving them expectations, and then they'll stop trying to subvert them.
That makes sense. When I was referring it to being a Hasbro situation, I mean Hasbro writing a check to James White for $100 million.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, something like that. I was thinking more like, what would we have to do to, get LSS specifically? Because in my mind, that was the question. If Hasbro buys LSS and then pulls a Hasbro, that's a completely different story to me. I was just trying to think of like in the past, when was my Twitter feed or my Reddit perusals or my whatever the most doom scrolly for this game? And the answer that immediately came back to me was whenever there was not a lot of news, whenever it was news light, right?
Yeah.
Like there used to be that dead zone, like after Worlds and before stuff picked up in February, and like clockwork, everyone would be like, the game is just dying. And it's like, well, yeah, because you hit the holiday season. Like, of course, right?
Yeah, they're just not doing anything.
But that used to be the worst. And so I was just thinking like, well, if we just have a dead zone, then that's when you'll get your doom scrolling back.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, moving on. Next one is from Sephiroth. What are your thoughts on everything that has happened with Commander, so Magic, over the past 2 weeks? Also, I want a Necromancer class strictly for lore reasons. I want them to reanimate Emperor so we can have him as an adult hero. Okay. So Commander, well, what happened was Commander had a rules committee that was a governing body for their most popular casual yet sometimes competitive format called Commander, formerly known as Elder Dragon Highlander, aka EDH, that the rules committee determined card legality. And the rules committee decided to ban 3 very pricey cards that people have shelled out money for in no small amounts to have these cards for their competitive EDH decks and go to events and play in competitive these 100 card competitive events where a bunch of bizarre shit is legal. And when these cards were banned, the sky fucking fell for these purveyors of cardboard entertainment as their, $500 worth of cards, round numbers, suddenly turned into approximately $130 worth of cards, again, round values. That's a big loss to a lot of players who, in some cases, traded away significant equity to obtain these cards so that they could play competitively, figuring that these are all necessities for what they're trying to do. In 2 cases, they are artifacts that can be played in any deck. They don't require any gates, and they are fast mana that allows you to play your cards faster.
Yeah.
And
Just
get your end game quicker.
if you don't know anything about Magic the Gathering, imagine if they banned Fyendal's Tunic tomorrow.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. But they banned it, but they only banned it in UPF, but UPF was super popular. And that's basically it. So my thoughts were it felt pretty blindsided as far as what I'm not in this community anymore. I definitely the specifically Jeweled Lotus was not legal at any point in time in my Magic playing, full stop. So I didn't even know what the fuck that card did. Then I read it. I'm like, well, that's dumb. And then moved on. And so, but judging from what I've been reading and such, it has caused a maelstrom in every facet, like people resigning from the different committees. WotC has now, or Wizards of the Coast, sorry, has now taken the format back under its governance and removed the rules committee from their decision-making prowess. So there's a lot. My biggest thing is that I do feel bad for people who, again, they committed significant equity because they wanted to be able to play these cards in a competitive fashion, and now they can't. There's still the ability to play them casually, because the different play groups will have different rules or different setups. Like, hey, do you care if I play with this? No, they call it Rule 0, and that'll be okay. But what happened to it from a value perspective and to people's equity, I think is very bad in general for the game. It definitely drives down consumer confidence because there's really no, what's the best way to put this? There's no impact to the competitive tournament community of Magic with this. This has no bearing on any of their flagpole formats of the game that are outside of specifically Commander. So it's their Pro Tour formats. There's things like that. Their our regional championship formats. None of that stuff is touched by this. It is solely their most popular version of playing this game that got touched by this, and making this type of decision in a vacuum and kind of out of nowhere seemed really weird. Do you have any other thoughts about this?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. None of them are like particularly insightful or helpful. I have decided
your normal thoughts. Got it.
I have decided, since this is part of a game that doesn't directly impact me, and I'm removed from it, that I can just enjoy this. And I don't mean that I enjoy the misery of others. Obviously, like, you spend a bunch of money and now you're out. Like, I feel bad. There is also I just want to say, like, full stop though, if you're listening and you play any card game, Magic, Flesh and Blood, Star Wars, Altered, whatever, there's always a chance you're going to lose money on your cards, right? That is just a tacit part of being in the trading card game hobby, whatever. Doesn't make this any more like okay or palatable, but like that is a risk that you need to accept. And if that makes you uncomfortable, you might want to assess that now as opposed to when it's a problem. So with that out of the way, I have decided to adopt a conspiracy theory.
Oh, shocking.
Because my headcanon is far more fun and interesting anyway. It develops a certain level of intrigue. I believe, in my headcanon anyway, I have no evidence to support this, by the way, that the rules committee didn't actually do the banning, and that they are scapegoats. Fall guys, well, fall people will not to engender it. Fall people, if you will. And my reasoning for this is because after, as you had pointed out, right, like after the ban was announced, bans, a bunch of people left the committee, and there was some talk about, well, did they resign or were they removed? Either way, Hasbro / Wizards of the Coast is taking it back. But one thing that hasn't happened is that they didn't suddenly reinstate them. They didn't go like, hey, this was clearly a mistake. You know, Wizards has taken the format back. It's in their court now. They've been pretty quiet. And a lot of those people that were on the committee have also been relatively quiet since leaving. So there's a big part of me that wonders if they were like, hey, we're going to make this change. And the rules committee was like, hey, we don't like that. And they were like, well, then, you know, we'll ask for your resignation. By the way, you signed NDAs. Good luck. Again, I have absolutely no evidence to support this whatsoever. However, it is what I choose to believe because that is a far more intriguing story than... and I'll be honest, it's just one that gives me hope for the Magic community, that like they had people that were speaking on their behalf and maybe they were shut down by a corporate greedy overlord. Because the alternative is just sad. The alternative is you had 3 people that were supposed to be in charge of a community and they were so out of touch that they ruined the experience for everyone, left as cowards in disgrace. Then their format was taken over by the greedy corporate overlords, and then they don't care enough about you to just reinstate things or address it anyway. That's really depressing. So I choose to believe the conspiracy side instead.
I wasn't going to blast that hard, but okay.
Well,
no, I'm fine with it.
You asked.
I mean, I did. You are correct.
I said they are not an insightful or helpful thoughts, but they are thoughts that I have had.
Of all the thoughts you've had, they are yours.
Yes.
We're gonna go ahead. Oh yeah, and you can add reanimating the Emperor. Go nuts. Have fun. Necro all day long. Just, you know, try not to put your dick in it, I guess.
Yeah, it's necromancy, not other
necrophilia. Next question is from Jimny Ben, which is
is Ben.
Yeah. What are the betting odds for Heroes LL between this PQ season and Worlds? That's, I think, the only one that is going to be odds that are palatable is probably Dash.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably Dash. And so here's the thing. I don't know if it'll be done by Worlds.
I don't think it would be either.
I think that it might happen at Worlds because we do know that the Pacific region is very much in love with the mechanologists, right? So
your options for obtaining points to get even sniffing getting out of here this season are Dash and Phi. So far, Dash has 10 points this season to go up to 920. Phi has 5, so 1 win to go up to 791. There's a possibility. I have heard a lot of rumblings about people starting to relook at Phi again as a viable deck to race Auroras and put enough pressure on things that you know, in go wide fashions to really create uncomfortable game states, which is definitely the hallmark of Phi.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't surprise me if Phi picked up quite a bit more, but you would still need 22 wins and to get there.
I was just looking at where the points are, and looking at this list that I am right now, I can't imagine anyone else is going to be
close. 42 wins, not 22. Jesus.
Aurora starting from the bottom, Enigma basically starting from the bottom. I mean, she had, you know, some stuff at the start of the Miss Vale season, but not on enough at this rate anyway, where I would see her hitting it. I mean, could collect a decent number of points, sure, but not in danger of living legend.
No, I think Viserai and Viserai, Kano, Azalea all kind of spike into the top tier with this but they don't get out by any stretch of imagination. So Phi needs in the next 3 weeks needs 16 wins, or not Phi Dash needs 16 wins in the next 3 weeks. Now, once the Armory deck is legal, that could change dramatically in Dash's favor, because about halfway through, half of the season will be without the Armory deck legal. The other half of the season is with the Dash.io Armory deck legal. And some of those are things that Dash.ie can actually take advantage of and play. So we may see that spike happen then.
Yeah.
But right now, it's hard to say. But the only one that I would say that's even worth considering betting on, or even giving odds on, is Dash. And I would say, I'd have to break it down by week, because I think that the overall line is not palatable. I mean, it's your classic plus 110. Like, it's just a dog shit money line, maybe in plus 105. But the week to week, I think, is more interesting on that one. I don't think it happens this coming week. It definitely happened last week. I don't think it happens this coming week. The week after is a different story. Those odds are going to get a lot closer. But ultimately, I'm not convinced that anybody or any hero LLs with this season.
Yeah, and I also do think that even when the Armory deck comes, I think that you're going to have a number of folks on IO as well, right? So you're going to kind of have that split focus.
Mm-hmm. I said possible, but not probable is where I'd go with this. Moving on, question from Johnny Pastrami. I don't know why he asks these questions, but he does, and so I'm just going to ask him. What is your stance on innie versus outie belly buttons? I don't give a fuck. Like,
yeah, what is my stance? I didn't know anybody had a stance on them.
Stances?
Well, I mean, yeah, I have a stance. Like, I'm usually like a crane stance or a tiger stance, or
I like the relic stance, and I'm not opposed to that. Obviously, tiger versus crane is very important.
I like a very good happen stance.
A happen stance is nice.
Yeah.
In WoW, I like to stance dance a lot.
Those stance dance revolution used to be my jam, but no, I like it's a. If anything, I'm against both. Give me the no belly button.
You want the test tube baby?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I can agree on that. Just the smooth front.
Or just replacing the torso with more cyborg parts, right? Like either way, current versions of humanity are just too flawed, and we need to address it through transhumanism.
I'm really hoping nobody ever clips that, by the way.
No, it's just, transhumanism, man. Trans rights are human rights.
Trans rights. You're right. They are. But it's my ignorance that is coming to light here, because I did not ever think to apply that to cyborgs.
Imagine somebody taking just for a moment though. Imagine somebody taking my really bad clip out of context, right? Where they make it sound like I'm promoting eugenics, but then they also show me saying trans rights are human rights, and they're like, this was not only the same episode, but less than 30 seconds apart.
Correct. Less than 10 seconds apart.
Yeah, I'd be like that sometimes.
Yeah,
but one was satire. It's just I can say things with a straight face. The other one is real, obviously.
And we will let them determine which one.
No, trans rights are human rights. I will not buck on that. You are a big Transformers fan. I am your friend, and I want you to have the right to enjoy them as shitty as they are. Trans rights are not just human rights, but Logan rights.
Okay, now you have fighting words.
All right, so Geeks First says, what is the best route to go?
Come back, you piece of shit. Listen, Transformers are joy personified. I don't understand why you hate. Like, I get why you hate them, because they are joy, and you fucking hate joy.
It's both that, and I was way too poor to not only not afford them as a kid, but I couldn't even afford GoBots.
Oh man, you can't afford the.
Do you want to know what my Transformers toys were when I was at the appropriate age?
A dead car battery? I don't know.
No. Well, no, that was jumper cables that I was beat with. But no, my toys were the McDonald's Happy Meal things that looked like there was the shake and the fries, and then they would transform. Those are what I had because my mom worked at McDonald's and she would bring them home for me.
See, there's the explanation I needed because I'm like, hold up, you got Happy Meals? But if your mom worked, okay, that makes way more sense.
I got corporate theft. That's what I got.
Well, all right. But yes, trans rights are human rights.
Hey, fun fact. I don't know if I've ever told you this before, but my mom actually was charged with and convicted of felony embezzlement, but at a different job, not at the McDonald's job.
Great. I mean, it's a retirement scheme, I guess.
Are you, well, I mean, she's long dead, so that didn't really work out. But anyway, are you figuring out why I hate Joy yet?
No, I've known for a while why you hate Joy. We are going to move on now, though.
Okay.
And we're going to go to Geeks First, who asks, what is the best route to go from 0 to deck building and not overthink your card pool? As in how not to get discouraged when building a deck. The hardest part about doing anything in gaming, competitive gaming specifically, is to not become results oriented. Because obviously you build something with the idea of winning, right? And a lot of times it's very difficult to understand the process that goes into it, and accepting that in the process of refinement and such, you're going to do things that you're trying something and it might not be good. No matter how hard you're convinced that it's good, it might not be good. So getting discouraged by not getting the result is very, very difficult. The other end of this being that results orientation can work against you the other direction. Hooray! Where you end up with a feedback loop that you're seeing the same thing over and over again. You tune to it. You think you can beat the field. Well, the field turns out to be just this one thing. And you really don't have a consideration because you've limited yourself to only seeing this one thing, creating some form of fashion of echo chamber. Also very difficult. And the last thing about results orientation is you can literally, in a game, play a matchup 100% perfectly and do everything right and still fucking lose. And it's very difficult to accept that you just lost. A lot of people I've seen this in person a lot. I don't have this happen to me, but people sort of go through the stages of grief when that happens. Denial, acceptance, anger, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, the whole thing. And so in deck building, I am not a good deck builder in Flesh and Blood. I'm just not. I get too off the wall. I don't have a lot of time. Time is very important. And I usually trust other people to give me a base and then I start refining. The way to not get discouraged when building a deck is to sort of understand where your starting point is and that it might not be equivalent to somebody else's. And so if it is, usually you'll find that the sort of blowouts are not the same. Like they don't feel the same. But when you're just starting at 0 with a deck and you're playing it into an established deck in a metagame, odds are you're getting the shit beat out of you. And that's a refinement point. And it's accepting the refinement points. No first draft is ever fucking right. As Hemingway used to put it, write drunk and edit sober. So that's kind of where you go. And the best way to get discouraged is to do the crazy shit and then edit. But maybe do one sober.
Just don't edit the way Hemingway did, unless you're me.
Editing your obituary with a shotgun is not what you should be doing. It's gonna throw that out there.
So, you pretty much hit everything that I would provide as advice. The biggest one is kind of what you were saying up front, which is not just don't be discouraged, don't trust early results in either direction. Understand that like the law of large numbers is a thing for a reason. And so until you've actually like played large numbers worth of games, you can't honestly take something seriously, because in card games, it's not uncommon for people to talk about like a 60-40 matchup being something that's favored, right? So that is, if I win 60% of the games and I lose 40, then I'm a favored matchup, right? Like that's usually the pretty standard benchmark. But in practice, what that looks like is if you play 10 games, you're going to win 6 and lose 4. And so if you are starting out your testing and you lose 3 in a row to start, that could be 3 of your 4, and you could actually be still piloting a favored deck. But if you give up, you'll never know. Similarly, you could go on a hot streak and be like, hey, I can't lose against this, but it could be, again, you're just on the hot streak. It could be also quality of opponents. Make sure you're testing with people you trust. I'm not going to say there's no value on Talishar, but you do have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because, again, everybody who's on there might have decks at different stages, like Logan was saying, right? So the last thing you want is to have what I call the Talishar All-Star deck and then show up and drop every game in an event, because now you're not only going to second guess your deck, but you're going to second guess like all of your decisions. So just don't trust any immediate results and understand it's not just a process, it's a long one, and then work from there.
Yeah, I will say that when it comes to Flesh and Blood, so I was actually a decent deck builder in Magic. And because the testing process in Magic was you take every matchup, you play 30 games. You play 10 main deck and you play 20 sideboarded, because at minimum, half your games are sideboarded and up to 2/3 of them are. So it's much more important to play sideboarded matchups than it is to play main decks. But a lot of people only tested main decks, which is fucking absurd. And that turned into a good way to kind of eliminate that feedback loop, is to get those post-board games going. And then you actually get to see what your actual favorability is. There's none of that in Flesh and Blood. Your deck's your deck, and you swap cards in and out. A lot of people talk about main and board, mainly because that's just the nomenclature that exists in TCGs. And in reality, there is no main or board. You just have X number of cards, and you present a number.
And it's what do you take out?
Right. That's it.
It's literally the way I think about it. It took me a while to adjust, because I was definitely like this is my core 60 and these are the changes I make kind of Flesh and Blood player at the start. And now it's literally like I start with this 80 and what do I take out and who do I take it out against?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that to me is this kind of another different way of that same deck building puzzle, because your deck building shouldn't be, okay, here's my 60 cards. What are the other cards I want? They should be a pool of 80 cards. And then you refine the 80 cards. Like, I haven't found a use for these cards yet. Maybe these come out, but I've really wanted these cards. So now these come in, and you whittle. It's a much bigger block of wood that you're trying to whittle with. But in the end, you're going to have a bigger thing that you're making versus, Magic, where it is 60 and 15. I hope that's helpful, but I think one of my favorite testing things was back in the Starvo meta. Dagan and I figured out that we would be nothing playing a ton of Starvo mirrors. That was just the life we're going to live. So we sat down and we would grind Starvo mirrors for hours. And one of the first things we found was that Awakening felt like shit in the Starvo mirror, to the point that, like, I beat Dagan twice in a row, which usually doesn't happen. He was playing the Awakening version. Every time he got caught with an Awakening in hand, that didn't fucking do anything. And eventually he's like, this card is ass. Just tears it out of the sleeve and throws it across the room and just sleeves literally anything else. And I'm just like, okay. And then he starts beating me. And so the feedback happened of, oh, that must have been the problem. Well, it probably wasn't. But in the end, we felt like it was just better into exactly this matchup. It's great it's a better card than we could be playing into every other matchup. But in this matchup, it's bad. And this is the thing that we were going to see.
Mm-hmm.
So out it went, because we'd rather have a better Starvo matchup, considering it was going to be half the fucking room. And that was it. That was part of the testing process, because you look at it and you diagnose what each card does independently, and you go.
Yeah,
like I said, hopefully that was some.
I had
hopefully that was good.
A similar moment with my Starvo testing. So mine was actually, I want to say it was like an Indianapolis calling, but there was
Calling
some.
Indy would have been Starvomir. Would have been
Yeah.
Starvometa, yeah.
So because there was an event that Majin Bay, Caleb and I, we were splitting a hotel room, and we were both going to be on Starvo at the event. So we were doing what you do, right? You're just back at the hotel, just jamming games. And what I landed on was exposed to the elements.
Trying to blow up Tunic?
No, it was for Crown. Every time I used it to blow up his crown, it was like a non-game. So I was just like, this is gas.
It was blowing up. It was more important to blow up Tunic against Oldhim than Crown.
Right. But against Starvo, because they were using Crown to filter to find the Voltron, right? All of the fuses. Like if you got rid of Crown and you had yours and they didn't, it was massive.
Yeah, that's a thing. And it's pretty easy to get the on hit from expose. So there is that. Moving on. This I think is our last question. Yeah, from Sergeant Swanson. I know this isn't making it this week. Haha, fuck off.
Wrong.
But DM Armada, good friend Stephen Cookus, made a tier list, but it was his own. I was wondering if you names us both, I don't know why, could do one for the podcast. You guys can set your own rules and talk about them or look at them objectively or whatever criteria you guys want. But I think it'd be fun to listen to, have fun, break some shit. Okay.
Oh, wait, I did homework for this.
Well, for the first time ever, we're gonna do personal rankings, holistic personal rankings of each in tiers S through D of each Flesh and Blood set. Oh yeah, I did that on purpose. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. You're first up. What are your D tier sets? Let's see if we match.
Dusk Till Dawn.
That is number one on my D tier sets. Congratulations.
And,
no argument here.
And that is the only one that I have in my D tier.
I have two in my D tier. I have Bright Lights right next to Dusk Till Dawn in the D tier. I have no joy in Bright Lights in any way, shape, or form.
I hear you. I couldn't bring myself to put any set in the D tier that was draftable because I just really like draft, and even if it is just Bright Lights, I will still draft it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, like I'm not saying that's the thing. I just think the set is bad, and that's just my personal opinion. And I find no joy in Bright Lights ever. C tier. How many do you have in your C tier?
I have 3 in my C tier.
I also have 3 in my C tier. Okay. So you want the first one? You want me to get the first one?
Well, I mean, I already gave you my first one because it's Bright Lights, right? Because I couldn't put it in D because it's draftable.
Again, since Bright Lights is in my D tier, it is not in my C tier. As I said, I know there's at least one of these that are going to be in a higher tier for you. Starting off my C tier is Uprising. I think the draft is bad. I don't really enjoy it. Fuck Dromai. Fuck Icelander. Fi's fine. But ultimately, it, I think, is sort of has that that homogenous feel in a lot of it, with the draconic theme, with only with 60% of the heroes being draconic. That's sort of my take on Uprising.
All right.
You have that much higher, I guarantee it.
I mean, I don't know about much higher, but I do not have it in my C tier.
What's your next C tier?
So I have Monarch.
We have both my Monarch in the C tier.
Everything not named Chain is stuff that just doesn't like super speak to me out of there. I think that in a second place, Levia is actually like pretty cool, but it's just not my play style preference. When I very first started playing the game, the first deck I ever played of my own, so like not counting stuff that people let me borrow. But like when I was like buying into the game, I actually played Bolton. That didn't even like last a week. I was just not having fun. So there's just not, outside of Chain, a lot left for me in Monarch. I really enjoyed playing Chain, but that was also pretty short lived. So yeah, Monarch.
Yeah, Monarch to me was just the draft format is boring. It's bad limited in my mind. It always feels imbalanced in a limited format, and we've learned that it's definitely imbalanced in a constructed format because hello Chain and Prism. And the other two, like the heroes outside of Chain don't really do anything for me. Levi is getting closer to making me go, okay, I could fuck with this, but still not there yet. And that set's been out for 3 years now, and yeah, I'm just kind of not into it. Okay, what's your third C tier set?
So my third C tier set is Arcane Rising.
Wow, we don't agree at all on this one.
And my reasoning is that it is my least favorite draft experience. Yes, you heard that correctly. I would rather draft Bright Lights than Arcane Rising. And it was underserved for a long time. Now, it is better now, but for a good chunk of the game's history, it was like Dash, and that was it. Azalea got no love for a long time. Viserai...
Viserai had plenty of love.
Well, so he did, but he didn't. So when he first came out, like he was played around with, but he didn't have enough tools. It wasn't really until Skeletor that he started to like really shine. Kano is just like the hero. I think a very polarizing subject. So wherever you land on Kano is probably going to influence it. But just overall, None of those heroes particularly speak to me. Of the most in there, it's probably Viserai because I do enjoy the Runeblade class, but he's probably my least favorite Runeblade. Like I think I would rather play Vincent even over Viserai.
My last in the C tier is Dynasty. What a worthless fucking set. Like, I mean, the only thing that I like about Dynasty that jumps out to me is I enjoy the Marvel CNC. That's about it. It's just, there just isn't, it's not for me. It's not draftable.
See, that's why Arcane Rising's also in the C tier, because it's not the Marvel CNC.
Well, no, it's
just the regular
CNC and Fate Foreseen and Ravenous Rabble. And I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, but Ravenous Rabble's in other sets now too. So I don't need to give that credit there.
Okay. And I did a traditional 2-3-2. On the way up and down. So I built myself a nice little pyramid here. So I have 4 in my B tier. How many do you have in your B tier?
I also have 4.
Okay, well we're doing this. They're doing this correctly. First one in my B tier is Heavy Hitters. I enjoyed the set. I have fun drafting the set. I think it's a really good experience from there. It seems low impact when it comes to current metas, but it did have a high impact at the beginning with KO doing great work, Kasai being a good deck, Victor's made some waves. Like there's stuff in that set. But because it's kind of the back to basics set, sometimes it feels like there just isn't enough. And but the limited is fun, but it's not so much fun. And I suppose it's directly in my enjoyable bubble.
Yeah, I could see that. So Heavy Hitters is also the first in my B tier. For a lot of the reasons that you said. For me, it's that it is very fun to draft and it is a good quality baseline set. I felt like that was particularly why I wanted it right in the middle. Like when I was thinking about like a set that is like my baseline for Flesh and Blood, anything above Heavy Hitters or equal to it is fine, and anything below it, not that there was a problem with it, but it's just like my less, right? Like it is my for my football fans out there, it is my Andy Dalton line, right? That is Heavy Hitters for me.
The red rifle is Heavy Hitters. All right, what's next in your B tier then?
Everfest.
Everfest is also in my B tier.
Yeah. So for me, this would be higher if it was draftable.
If it was draftable, exactly the same logic.
And while I appreciated what they were trying to do with it, the other thing that irks me about it, and I think that this is, going back to what you and I were talking about earlier about why nobody likes to open that set particularly, a lot of the cold foils being the kind of like unplayable items, I also really think impacted the attractiveness of the set, right? So like, let's just like go out on a limb here. When you compare like in Everfest, I might get like a cold foil, not even just like a potion, but just like some of the trinkets that you're supposed to play with Genus. Like, would I rather get that as like my whatever, or would I rather get a Merval dragon, right? Like, even if it's like one of the $10 ones or whatever, right? You're always going to pick the dragon, even if you don't play illusionist. Who doesn't like to open a cool Marvel dragon, right? And instead, are like once per box, like our cold foil slot was like, potion of whatever.
Talisman of recompense.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I do think that hurt what I will describe as attractiveness of the set. But it was very functional. There's a lot of fun stuff in it. So
there's a lot of just hyper playable cards.
Yes.
And people like, even in the rare and common slots, there are cards that to this day make a giant impact, and it holds a lot to another set we'll talk about later, in a lot of ways, where you're going through your set and it's like, oh, it's a ranger card, I have that. Where the fuck, oh my god, it's in Everfest,
Yep.
And I think that happens a lot, but you're right, it's not the best opening experience by any stretch of the imagination. So I guess it's my turn to hit the B tier. We both had Everfest. This is where I have Arcane Rising. And the reason is the impact on the game is super important. It is a bad draft. But unlike Monarch and Uprising, in my mind, this set was a good way to keep increasing the footprint of a nascent game, to give more and different options compared to the beginning at WTR. So to me, that's why Arcane Rising is in my B tier and not lower.
All right. So it's interesting because obviously I don't have Arcane Rising there, but I do have Uprising there. So my Uprising and your Arcane Rising have swapped. I swapped them because I think Uprising is more fun to draft than Arcane Rising. I think Uprising sets the precedent. So you talk about like impact of the game in terms of like what it did mechanically. Uprising to me set a standard for the game going forward for collectability, right? We get widespread Marvels for the first time. Like we got a taste of it with Everfest with the Marvel Starvo, right? But Uprising is where we started to see more Marvels pop up, but also that was the first set where we were truly abandoning the like first edition printing stuff. So it was more accessible with a good opening experience. At the time, it was a better, like, obviously looking back, you're right. It's like not the best draft experience, but at the time it was a better draft experience than most of the sets we had because it was still better than Arcane Rising, better than Monarch. So it was like, in the middle there. So I had that higher than Arcane Rising because to me, it was the real launching point of what I think of when I think of like Fab 2.0, right? That article that James put out, like Uprising to me is the start of that.
So it's number 4. Let's see if we match on this one. I'm very curious.
For me, it's Cow.
Cow.
Yep.
Oh, Crucible.
Just a fat cow. Crucible of War.
Because it's not draftable.
Because it's not draftable.
That makes sense. Mine is actually Part the Mistveil.
So I will also say the other reason that mine is Crucible here, it's not even just that it's not draftable, but also, if I'm being entirely honest, I have some of the worst memories of that set. Specifically because right when I was getting into the game, first edition Crucible existed, but Unlimited did not yet. And when I was trying to find cards and everything was vastly overpriced, and I was trying to get ready for Nats qualifiers back then, so I was like trying to hunt stuff down, and that was also a time like when everybody wanted snags. You know, snag was like a $40 card at the time. Every time I would like look up a card, and if it was like in Crucible, it was always a pain for me to find. So I will say there is a bit of like I just hate Crucible because of that experience. I concede there's good stuff in it. That's why it made it to my B tier, but I could not put it higher because I don't have fond thoughts about that set.
Understandable. Mine is Miss Vale mainly because it felt like it feels like a miss, not in a visual way. It's a super fun set to open, and the draft is at least okay, but the Zen experience, the immediacy of how mistake prone it felt, it doesn't. I think when I look at Mist Vale, I wince a little bit because it feels like it feels like for the first time since effectively really Monarch, but Dusk Till Dawn Monarch, that they swung and they missed they swung and connected, but they were trying, they hit it a little too hard. And the prevalence of these sort of broken things that happen so quickly gave an Aria feeling. And I have Aria higher, but it feels I don't know, like to me Mist Vale just I look at it and I go, just why? Sometimes,
I mean, I don't know, but I also I'll admit I'm probably more leaning on it simply because it reminded me of Aria, and I had Aria higher, and like when I like take a step back, I'm just like, yeah, it's very clearly something where like the power level was juiced, but I also still just like really enjoy some of the experiences, and that's kind of the same way I feel about Aria, right? Like I can very objectively be like, yeah, Aria was juiced, but also I really liked playing Aria, both like during that constructed setting and in limited. So it's, it's hard.
Well, let's move into A tier. I'll start with this one because it's a set that we've already talked about with Crucible of War. I have that in the A tier. I feel like this is the one. I think that this set is as fun as fuck to open because it feels wild when you've played the game for a while to be opening Crucible boxes and be like, shit, that was in Crucible. And also like your legendary opens are Tunic, which feels great. And Shiana. And Shiana is obviously one of my very favorite.
No, Shiana's in Crucible.
That's what I'm saying. Crucible. Right. Crucible. Cow. Sorry.
I know, but you were talking about something in the A tier, and it very clearly can't be Crucible, right?
It is Crucible of War. It is Crucible.
No.
And, again, my thought with Crucible is that it felt like the perfect glue for WTR and Arcane Rising to kind of cement them as this is the beginning. It makes those two sets feel so much more cohesive together. And again, some of my favorite cards that you can just get are in Crucible with Courage of Bladehold, Bletchy Skeleta, and like I said, Krunic, the Tunic, the first Tunic reprint. There have been several, but
yeah,
the first Tunic reprint, and Shiana being one of my favorites, and then also just straight up Shard, like what a cool fucking gem, and they just haven't done anything like it since.
It is one of two Fables I don't own. Well, three. I don't have the Rosetta one yet.
Yeah. Or no, it's not Gully. The Rosetta one is mystical. It's not the gem, the wizard gem.
Right.
Will of Arcana.
Yeah, I just haven't opened a lot of Rosetta yet, so I don't have that. Yeah. But I have the Mistveil one.
So where are you starting your A tier?
My A tier starts at Welcome to Wraith.
Whew. Okay, fighting words.
It's just a really well balanced set. It checks a lot of the boxes that I have for heavy hitters. But it's also a bit more diverse, right? Or at least it feels diverse. So when you are playing the set, whether it was, constructed or especially in limited, you felt like the pool was central enough that you could still draft it regardless of what class you are in, but then your hero identity still felt, different enough, right? If you drafted Ninja and then you played Katsu, you still felt like you were playing Ninja. If you drafted Bravo, you still felt like you were playing Guardian. If you drafted Dorinthia, you still felt fine there. Brute is always going to feel brutish. So they, I think, really did a good job of taking 4 distinct classes and then kind of keeping their identity and also making it an introductory set. So when you look at all of that, and honestly, like how many games, not just like in the last couple of years, how many games in the history of trading card games do you have so many cards from your first base set still be relevant throughout the history? Because there's a lot of stuff rare. That's still playable from Welcome to Wraith.
If you think about Magic and Alpha, the dual lands are, because you really have to think about Legacy. You kind of have to. But the dual lands, Dark Ritual, Lightning Bolt, you're starting to run out already.
Well, and what I would also say about Magic from those first sets as well, right, is I guess I should say playable without needing banned. So like obviously Tome of Fyendal recently got banned, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a bit of a mark against it. But really, like when we think about those early Magic sets, we're all gonna, kind of talk about the Power 9 or whatever, right? Where that was so wildly warped that to me that's like not in consideration.
No. That's why I said legacy legal.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas with this game, I mean, it's a lot of the equipment, right? Scabs, tectonic plating. I still see get play Tunic, obviously, but even outside of that, like Snapdragons, right? It's a common equipment.
Yeah, Braveforge bracers.
Braveforge
bracers.
Every
wizard deck or warrior deck.
Obviously, like Enlightened Strike's one of the big Majestics there. But like even so the other thing too, right? Like even when you think about what I was going to say were other Majestics, but really it was super rares or whatever back then. But cards like Remembrance still get peppered in. There's still a lot of just staple commons for a lot of those classes, right? So there's just a lot of juice still in that for a base set. Like you can tell that one was a labor of love.
My next one is, since we're in fighting words, I guess, my A tier. I have 3 in my A tier.
I have 3 in my A tier.
I have Outsiders in my A tier. I think that it's a fun draft. I really enjoy it. It has enough diversity in what it's doing, and it really introduced a new class. Like you can say that, Arachne first showed up in Dynasty, but Outsiders is really where Assassin becomes a thing. You do have super powerful cards with Codex of Frailty being kind of the headliner there. And I think that Outsiders kind of became the new the set that things were based around. And to me, that gives it a spot in the A tier because there really are no flaws I see in Outsiders.
Have you read Codex of Frailty?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
I have never had a problem with that card. So just
sorry, that'll never not be funny to me. I'm just saying.
Like, what the fuck, people? What do you got in your A tier? What's next in your A tier?
Next is Tales of Aria.
Okay.
I really enjoyed playing it.
Is your fucking S tier Outsiders and Dynasty, you fucking simp?
And part the Mistveil, yes. Those are my
You're
three.
such
I'll
a
just
simp.
rip that Band-Aid off right
You're
now.
such a simp.
I
Oh my god.
started this tier maker by putting Outsiders, Dynasty, and Part the Mistveil in S, and then I did the rest of the tier.
You are such a bitch. Okay.
So yeah, it's Tales of Aria. I really enjoyed playing the set. Yes, it's obviously got power level problems, but from a limited perspective, especially once you factor in Errated Briar, it was just a lot of fun. And yes, all of those heroes kind of ran rampant for quite a bit throughout the meta, but honestly, it still wasn't like an overly negative experience, at least for me personally. I'm sure that everybody's mileage will vary, but like when Cheerios Briar was running rampant, like, you know, even when I was a Pioneer, like I didn't mind. You know, when Lexi was I think maybe the worst I felt was at the tail end when all of the other ones were gone. And so we just had like Lexi. And so there was no like equalizing power, right? But in those days when you had to deal with like Briar and Oldhim and Lexi and whatever, like, it felt okay. So I don't know. I really liked the set. I thought that it was trying to do some cool stuff. I think that it did it well. Again, power level is really the only knock against it.
All right. My third set in A is actually Rosetta. I think that this has the opportunity to be an S tier set. It's just too early. I've drafted it twice. I've played it sealed a bunch. I've enjoyed every single time that I've done it. Nothing has felt bad. I obviously found a hero in there that I really enjoy playing. And oddly enough, it's not the hero I force and limited or anything like that either. The only thing that is sort of still a mystery to me is the puzzle that is Ocilio. But otherwise, it is, I think it's really well built. I think that the thoughts that are put into Rosetta as a whole are incredibly deep. I think that there is so much to explore in the set with the with these four heroes. But it's too early for me to say that this is in that sort of greatness tier. Instead, it's in that, you know, this is awesome tier. And I really enjoy this set. It is not as much fun to open in some cases, mainly because of kind of the way that it seems like the spread of cards is. Your box is either full on gas or it's absolute trash. It doesn't seem to be any in betweens. So there's a little bit of an issue with collation, how fun the set is to open. But when you do hit the bangers, they are bangers. They feel that part feels great. But otherwise, I think that's been very healthy for Classic Constructed. I think it's a great draft experience. I'm very excited to play in draft ProQuests. Yeah, I think that this is so far an A set, on its way to being an S tier.
Yeah. I mean, it's the third set that I have in my A tier. My A was Welcome to Wraith, Rosetta, and Tales. And it was for all the reasons that you just said. So I don't have a ton more to add.
S tier is poisoned.
It's excuse you, it is poxed.
Whatever. My S tier is Welcome to Wraith and Tales. So Welcome to Wraith, in my mind, is the second. It's either the first or second favorite draft experience in a TCG, full stop, for me. The first probably still is Invasion, Planeshift, Apocalypse draft in Magic. That draft format is gas.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So good.
It was
Holy
good.
Shit.
You know what one I enjoyed slightly more though? OG Ravnica block.
Yeah, that's so. If I were different tier maker, but when you're talking about Magic sets, it's I take IPA over OG Ravnica, but OG Ravnica is 2. And then it's Time Spiral, triple Time Spiral. And then it's triple Innistrad, and then Rise of the Eldrazi, and then triple Innistrad.
Time Spiral would probably be my third as well. You're talking about like Time Spiral, Plane Shift, Future Sight, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just because like I loved that block as well. This is going to be a really hot take because I know a lot of people did not like it, but after that, for me, it's the original Kamigawa block.
Was a good draft. It was a good draft. It was a shit block for constructed.
Well, right. Like when you compared it to everything else that came out around that time, like imagine if you're not somebody who plays Magic, imagine every set is Tales of Aria, and then you get like a non-Tales of Aria set, right? Because this set was like sandwiched in between like Mirrodin and
Mirrodin and Ravnica.
Yeah, just bonkers sets. But self-contained, like in and of itself as a block, was very thematic.
Mirrodin
and had
Time Spiral.
And had so many cool things going on within it. So I really enjoyed the draft experience. I loved
draft was
the
good.
Arcane stuff. I loved the Spirit and the Kami stuff. Like
I loved Kabuto Moth. Just the card Kabuto Moth. And also Jite, which broke limited. But the but triple ROE was my biggest, especially in most games, my hallmark, my reasoning for something being great and limited is when you're drafting it, you don't just take the best card in the pack. You're drafting a deck. You're not drafting a pile of good cards. You're drafting a deck. And that is all three of these formats. All these formats I'm talking about is you're drafting a deck.
Mm-hmm.
Even WTR, like, yes, there are some instances where you just will take the best card in the pack because it's generic. And the generics are overtly powerful in some cases. So things like Enlightened Strike, red Sink Belows, red Sigils, those types of things. But otherwise, you're looking for the shit to glue your deck together with. So in Katsu, you need enough blue zeros. In Bravo, it's blue block 3s that cost 3 or more or whatever, so that Anathos is turned on anytime that you can do it.
Dorinthia, you gotta have Go Again.
Yeah, you gotta find the Go Again cards for Dorinthia, or else it sucks. Rhinar, they have to be 6s.
Yep.
Like it is. Blue Wrecker Romp is just by miles the best common for Brute in Welcome to Wraith. Just full stop. That card is everything the deck wants. So it has that same feeling to me, and that's why I love it as a draft experience, is because Welcome to Wraith, while you still have that, you can stay generic for the entire first pack if you want to, but you then have to look at the generics you drafted and hope that they fit with something. Otherwise, you might just have a pile, and the pile will lose to the best deck. Why go through your assassin shit?
I mean, we already did. My S tier is Dynasty, Outsiders, Perth and Mistveil.
Why are they your S tier?
Those are the sets that have assassin in them.
Okay, good. I'm glad that we covered that.
I mean, if you want a more like reasonable explanation, Outsiders is my favorite drafting experience, far and away in Flesh and Blood. I really like I like that they gave us essentially 6 heroes that were all still kind of unique. Like you weren't just drafting Ranger because you were still looking for traps if you wanted Riptide, or the buffs if you were more on Azalea. Even when you were trying to decide between Uzuri and say like Solitary Confinement, obviously you have a greater emphasis on stealth for Uzuri as more as a starter, where it's a starter for Solitary Confinement, but in a different way because it's going to get Go Again, right? You're not using it to embolden a stronger attack. So every hero felt cool. I love that we got the split cards. I just really liked that draft experience. It's far and away my favorite, assassin simping aside. Dynasty, objectively, that one is probably my simp pick. I will say I think that it gets an unfair amount of hate. The Emperor's Throne Room Marvels are still some of the coolest in my mind. I appreciate that they tried something new in just saying, hey, what if we did throw an entirely new class at you in a supplemental set? What would that look like, right? So They get points for trying in my book. And then Part the Mistveil, I genuinely also just really enjoy the limited experience. I think that I like it mostly because it is a low-powered limited experience that does not feel low-powered. The big emphasis on blues in that set means that even on your impactful turns, you're not threatening like a ton of damage. So you can do powerful things and still not just like win the turn in one game. And that is a subtlety that I genuinely appreciate. So outside of Dynasty, I probably still would put the other two in my S tier if I wasn't simping. But yeah.
My last S tier is Tales of Aria. Now, the caveat is real here. The caveat with this is if we are talking about post or pre-errata Briar, this goes to the C tier immediately.
Immediately.
It's real bad with pre-errata Briar because blocking 12 or never 12, but blocking like 5 with a card and still having a 3-card hand to come back with a fuck ton of damage was shitty, like real shitty,
and damage that you couldn't prevent. Like
right.
Full stop. The real reason that I could not, in good faith, put Tales of Aria in my S tier is Rosetta Thorn and the lack of Arcane Barrier. Now, obviously, they learned their mistake, right? They learned from their mistakes in later sets. Rosetta is a great example. Even when you have Arcane, like they give you different ways to interact with it. But if you're not familiar, Rosetta Thorn was a very easy to activate weapon that Briar had that does 2 arcane damage. And there was one card in the entirety of Tales of Aria that had AB on it, and it was a legendary, and it was AB1. So even then, you could only consistently stop one of the 2 from Rosetta Thorn.
Because you had Spell Void 2 on Legendary Arms.
Yeah, but I said consistently stop.
Sure. Yes, that the arcane damage from the rune blades was problematic, but so were the frostbites from Guardian, and so from the lightning classes, the arcane damage, and then frostbites from the Guardian and frostbites from the Ranger. I thought that the interplay wound up being fine for the most part. I love the fuse mechanic to this day. I love the fuse mechanic. I think that one is really good. I think that the set is balanced. You talked about this when you talked about Aria, but I think the set is balanced within itself super well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important. The limited experience, yes. If there's one Briar at a table, that Briar is fucking winning. But the same holds true if there's one Lexi at a table, it becomes kind of free for the Lexi. And a lot of people were scared of playing Lexi because they just didn't get it. And Lexi was super powerful if you knew what you were doing. And Oldham was super good if you knew what you were doing. But there were bomby things in the set, like Winter's Wail was just holy fuck. Dealing with a Winter's Wail was just hard as fuck. It was just rough. Same with dealing with a Voltaire. Not easy. It was always funny to me because you would still play Rosetta Thorn over Duskblade in Limited.
Yeah.
Because Thorn. But Briar sometimes, especially with Briar, had Runeblade hands that sometimes just didn't do shit. And the best they could do is block. So I feel like the set was really well balanced. It was super flavorful. To this day, people just still love Lexi, Oldham, and Briar. There are simps everywhere, nationwide, worldwide for those 3. And people are always asking, when do we get more of this? And I thought that this should have been the real capper to what is Fab 1.0 is this, not Everfest. It just turns out that Everfest has the greatest mistake ever printed in Flesh and Blood, which is also why Everfest is in the B tier.
Which is the greatest mistake?
Starvo.
Oh, because you know what else is in Everfest? the only non-token card that you can't play in
Right.
any format.
Kraken's Aetherbane.
So we actually have to add that qualifier now.
Yeah, we do. 2 mistakes in that set. But Starvo's still the biggest mistake that has ever been printed in Flesh and Blood. A bigger mistake than Dustblade. And even though Dustblade, literally, they had to come out with an article that started with, "We made a mistake." That's not to say that Starvo isn't incredibly fun, because both of us played Starvo.
Yeah.
And we had a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that Starvo wasn't fun. It's just that it was busted. And a lot of Arya catches a lot of blame for Starvo being Starvo, but Starvo was an Everfest. So
right.
Yeah. But yeah, it was fun to do. It was a fun exercise. Thank you, Sergeant Swanson, for recommending it. Had a good time with it. Maybe we'll do another one sometime in the future. It'll definitely replace Reddit question of the week if we do.
Oh, hey, are you ready to do that?
You fucking asshole.
Don't worry.
Did you get one?
I'm not going to read the entire thing. This one is very, very quick. Okay. Because I know that you're ready to get out of it.
Who's the author?
Labman95. So I'm not going to read the full question. I'm just going to read the title, because that's all we need for me to answer this. The title is Auxilio even viable? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
More than viable. Best deck in the format. You and everyone you know should be playing it at your local ProQuest. Anyway, this Reddit of the week question was brought to you by definitely-not-a-psyop.com. And I look forward to seeing all the Auxilios at my local events.
No notes. I'm going to get out of here, though.
You should thank patrons first.
I'm going to thank patrons first.
Okay.
We'll start with our associate producers. We have Andy, Sindra, Jacob, and the Salty Sea Cat. With our executive producers on up, we have Blaze Storm, value member of the Patreon. Dom Lance, good thrust. Matt Tutokes, Pucks on us. Vintox 18, the Eurasian pole of inaccessibility. So that actually has... Google it, people. Google the Eurasian pole of inaccessibility. I promise you it's worth your time. Philip, Rich, and Sergeant Swanson, if you are interested in becoming a patron of Flesh and Pod, you can go to patreon.com/Flesh and Pod. Link is in the show notes. There are 6 tiers to choose from. Pick one. Any paid tier gets you into Fab After Dark, at which point you can learn about the Eurasian pole of inaccessibility, because that's where that came up. That sounded dirtier than I intended. But it's also accurate. If you need to contact the show, you can send us an email at fleshandpod@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at fleshpod on Twitter. You can also just join our Discord. Link is in the show notes. It's free to join. You don't have to be a member of the Patreon. You just come in, hang out, talk shit. And if you are a paid member of the Patreon, you can get it at Fab After Dark, which is the live show we do where the Eurasian pole of inaccessibility comes up. Yet again, dirtier than I expected. Darick, where can they find you?
In the Discord, pinging Jordan because I love him.
Are you doing it again?
I should, but I will leave him be for now. On Twitter, I'm at that Charmer. It's that Charm3R.
Just Charmer. Win games.
Yep, numbers and names win games. It's just Charmer on Twitch and YouTube and other places usually. But yeah, that's where you can find me, I guess. And you can find me at Osaka.
So you can also find him in Osaka.
Say hello if you're there.
Yeah, and if you need to get a hold of me directly, I'm the person that is handling all of the socials all the time anyway, so that's still going to be me. But if you want my personal, it's at Logan Peterson. It really, the only difference there is I respond to other people's shit more from that account. Yeah, and then some sports stuff and things like that, but mostly it's the Flesh and Pod account, or it's mostly the Discord. So that's the best way to get a hold of any of us. It's 150 next week. You're not going to be there, but it's 150 next week.
Yeah,
I got to find a fucking co-host. I had to do this for 50.
Yeah, you did.
Maybe I'll go see if the same people are available. Maybe we'll do that. That kind of sounds fun.
That could
100
be
episodes
fun.
later. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I'll do that. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Join us next week for 150, where I don't know the fuck I'm doing yet. So thank you very much for hanging out, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.